Welcome to Season 8, Episode 27 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday the 8th of September, and we're going to discuss what's been happening in the news and in the community. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello.
Martin.
Hello.
And Laura.
Hello.
How are we all this week?
Great.
Jolly good.
Yep. Very well,
Already
thank
dark.
you.
Already started recording. That hasn't happened for a while.
It's that winter thing coming around again.
Yes. Yeah.
The nights are drawing
That's
in.
not good. That's
No.
not good. Has everyone got a hot toddy with them?
I've just finished my tea.
Oh.
What, a cat?
That'll do.
I've got nothing. Just a
Oh.
darkness out the window.
Well, keep it light. Let's get on with the show, shall we?
Okay.
And now it's time for the news. First item on the news is Unity have released a version of their game development toolkit for Linux. And this is good. And it's not to be confused with Unity, the desktop that we make, or the VMware thing, or anything else called Unity. Or
You preempted me.
or the game that's got something called Unity in it as well. So it's none of those. It's a game development tool that's been around on Mac and Windows for a long time, and lots of indie developers and like non-indie developers, big companies use it for developing games. And we've talked about this before. It's been a thing that they've wanted to release for a long time, and now they have. And there was an updated build as well today. So they're keeping it up to date as well.
Cool.
Any of you tried it?
Nope.
No.
I get very confused
I was
whenever I
going-
look at anything which does sort of 3D graphic stuff. I never really understand it.
Well, the good news is it does
What way?
2D as well. So
Oh, does it?
your poor little brain could cope with the two-dimensional stuff as well, I'm sure.
I might have to give it a go then.
How do you cope in everyday life?
I wear 2D glasses.
I was going to install it earlier, and then as it was downloading, I noticed that the deb file is 980 megabytes. So,
Is it really?
I'll come back to that. Yeah, it's the biggest deb file I have ever seen.
It's a bit of a monster.
So, yeah, I've got that download paused, and I shall resume it later.
Yes. I think this was announced last week before or so, the first one. 26th of August, the first one was announced, and the latest release was today as we're recording this on the 8th of September. And it's quite nice because, it's been the top on the list of their, wish lists from their users of things that, people would like to see. What we now need them to do is keep it up to date, keep, releasing updated versions, people to file bugs. They've got a forum and a bug tracker and all that kind of stuff, and for people to actually use it as well. And, it's good. I mean, it's proprietary rubbish, of course, because it's, evil proprietary software, but, it's nice
It's
to
on
have.
Linux.
Yeah, it's nice to have that proprietary software on our free software platform.
Can you use it to make open source games?
Well, you could make the game available and the, all the assets and, but in order for someone else to contribute, they would, if they were going to contribute to the game code itself,
Yes.
they would probably need a copy of Unity. So they would need that. I mean, if they were an artist or, a musician or something, or creating sound effects, then obviously they don't need access to Unity. But if you wanted to contribute to the code, then it's the same as, any of these proprietary tools like, Adobe Photoshop. To edit Photoshop files, you need Photoshop. To edit Visio files, you need Visio. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's incredibly popular, and it's nice to see it on Linux.
What's up next, Martin?
Well, next up, we've got news from Microsoft, Google, Mozilla, Cisco, Intel, Netflix, and Amazon.
And Apple?
And they've launched no, not Apple. No, never mind. They've launched a new consortium, the Alliance for Open Media. And this group plans to develop the next generation of media formats, including audio and still images, but with video as the top priority. And the idea is that they can deliver them as royalty-free, open source, suitable for commercial and non-commercial content.
So is this the next generation from VP8 and Theora and what was that other one that was named after a scientist?
Darla, was it, or something like that?
Oh God, someone's shouting at their podcast player right now because I can't remember the name.
I don't remember either. But yes, this feels like familiar ground because you mentioned VP8 and we've kind of been here before, but everyone's working together with the exception of Apple, apparently, to create a new set of standards around video encoding at the moment. And it's interesting because when this has been attempted in the past, I think it was VP8 that ran into this. The MPEG-LA then pointed out there was a number of patents that were infringed by VP8 and Google had to go off and negotiate some redistribution rights. So I think the challenge is actually creating a new way of encoding video that doesn't infringe on prior art.
Who owns those patents?
Well, I imagine the MPEG-LA own a number of the patents because they've got H.264 and 265 and all the legacy stuff as well. So I think and I remember there was a project that was creating a video encoder that worked in a way that was quite different from everything that had come before, deliberately to sidestep these patent concerns. But I can't remember the name of the
I found it.
The project.
Was it Dirac?
The BBC one?
Yeah, they're Schrodinger and Dirac. See, I knew it was in there somewhere. That one. Yeah, this was a few years ago to try and make an open source, free software implementation of a codec. Will these succeed? Because there's massive companies behind it, except Apple.
I think between Microsoft, Google, and Intel, if you want three companies on your side when you're making a new way of encoding video, I'm pretty sure that between them they could manage it, and also having the others as well.
Yeah, I think the two interesting ones there are Netflix and Amazon that are obviously, making lots of waves in the, premium content streaming business at the moment. So maybe they're your early adopters to help, enforce the standard.
Yeah. And they're going to know exactly what it needs to do well.
Yeah, and devices will come that support Netflix and Amazon Prime Video that support these new codecs, and Intel will doubtless be making something. So Google with their partners.
If they're royalty-free open source, does that mean they're not DRM'd, or is that a different issue?
Ooh.
No,
I imagine that's a different issue.
Yeah, because
they'll still have the ability to have DRM. It's just that other people will be able to implement the codec. So, for example, Kodi, the open source Xbox media player, as was Media Center, will potentially be able to implement these codecs, so they could potentially play back
they could
those
read.
streams.
Yeah.
But
so this will probably. Sorry, Alan.
I wouldn't be surprised if Netflix, Amazon, and whoever else would wrap, or have some pluggable DRM on it as well, in the same way the encrypted media extensions in Chrome work. In that you're allowed to. You're not going to get sued to be able to play back the video stream, but if it's encrypted with in DRM'd, then all bets are off, because while you've got the ability to decode it, if you haven't got the key, you're screwed. You can't play it back.
Yeah, I expect this will be to sort of define the standards for the codecs, and then people will make their own implementations, open source or otherwise.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on what comes out of that.
Yeah.
Mark, what's next?
Mycroft, open source's answer to Google Now and Amazon Echo, has reached its funding goal on Kickstarter.
Hooray!
So Mycroft calls itself the world's first open source, open hardware home AI platform. It's built on a Raspberry Pi 2 and some software, which is all going to be open source. I would argue that if it's on a Raspberry Pi, it's not technically open hardware, but no one's really come up with a canonical definition of open hardware, so we can probably argue that until the cows come home. But basically, it's this cool little box with a Raspberry Pi inside, and you say to it, Mycroft, tell me the weather, and it tells you the weather, and then you can also hook it up to other devices, so you can say things like, play It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia on the TV in my bedroom, and it hooks up to your Chromecast and tells it to play the thing.
Nice. And I guess, given that it's open software and you'll be able to get hold of the software. You don't necessarily have to use a Raspberry Pi 2. You could use a piece of open hardware or some other device or something more powerful if you wanted to do some local processing that the Pi wasn't capable of doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, there's already a similar system available already as well, which I can't remember what it's called, something like Jasper, which also runs on a Raspberry Pi, which does similar things in terms of voice recognition and hooking up to commands. So yeah, it looks like there's a few options coming along if you wanted to build your own.
So you said open source and open hardware. Does this run entirely on the Raspberry Pi, or does it connect out to some cloud
yes and no
server?
Yes, by default they're building it so that it reaches out to the cloud. The local machine recognizes the keyword, so the word that you use to activate it, which by default is Mycroft, but hey Mycroft, that kind of thing, to get its attention, that's interpreted locally. But then anything you tell it to do is offloaded to the cloud, because the services are more mature and better that can do that.
Yes.
But they've said they will look at integrating other local solutions as well. So you're not necessarily tied to only being able to use proprietary cloud services. You could potentially have something fully local.
And you're not locked into a single cloud service like you are with Google or Amazon.
Yes. The CTO from the company, Ryan Sipes, was on the Ubuntu community team Q&A today, where he answered a whole load of questions about this. If you go to the Ubuntu On Air YouTube channel, you'll find the video. The date will be 8th of September. So if you just look for that video, it's got Daniel, David and Mike and Ryan, and he talks through some of the technical decisions they made and their plans for the future, and reveals some things that they haven't talked about in their Kickstarter yet, which is quite nice. So that's worth watching. It's an hour long, but there's quite a lot of info in there as well if you're interested in it.
Cool. Have any of you backed it?
I did, actually. I backed it on the first day.
Awesome.
And I only backed it at the software level because I figured I've already got a Raspberry Pi and I don't really need the flashy box. So I only backed the software side. I didn't back the hardware. But yeah,
I've not.
Sorry.
I've not backed it. I haven't quite decided if this is what I want to tinker with. I've got a note in my list of things to explore, and one of them is Jasper, and it's been in my things to do for about 8 months. But it's an interesting project. And if you're listening to this podcast, the Kickstarter's probably finished by the time you listen to this, because on the day of recording, there's only 48 hours remaining, but they have reached their funding goal. So whatever they're planning is going to happen.
And I'm sure they'll carry on taking your money after that anyway.
Yes.
Laura, what's next?
So Mozilla is beginning to preview its iOS Firefox browser with a rollout for testing in New Zealand. And the goals for the company to gather data so that they're able to bring Firefox for iOS to the App Store for the rest of the globe later this year. Though there's not that much left of this year.
This is a weird one. So
why is it weird?
Because they're saying that they have to, they're like experimenting to make sure that they stay within the bounds of what you're allowed to put on iOS. But as I understand it, if you put anything on iOS with a web browser in, it has to use their WebKit rendering stuff, doesn't it? So this isn't actually a Gecko-based browser. This is something which has sort of the same features that Firefox does on Android, but is in fact WebKit.
Yes. That's essentially it's the same as Chrome on iOS. There's a Chrome browser on iOS, and it has the same ability to synchronize your bookmarks and all the other features that you're, over and above rendering. The things you're actually wanting from your browser is, tab management, history management, the ability to synchronize things between machines, those kind of things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago. It has all of that. And I think the rendering engine is largely immaterial. I think you could argue that, but it's the value add that you get from the browser is the bits around the outside, which Firefox bring.
Yeah, the keywords in their announcement are it's a Firefox experience.
Right.
Oh God! Someone from PR had a go at that, didn't they?
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Moving
on,
Alan. The eagerly awaited Raspberry Pi display is now available. It is priced at £48 or $60. It's 7 inches. Can do 60 frames a second at 800 by 480 resolution, 24-bit color. It's 10-point capacitive touchscreen. You have to have quite small hands to fit 10 fingers on a 7-inch display. But I'm sure
trying to work that out.
I'm sure you can manage.
Small children.
Yeah,
think small children.
Yes. And it's got a 70-degree viewing angle, metal back display with mounting holes for the Pi, so you can attach the Pi to the back of it and have it as like a little standalone computer that might sit on your desk and be useful for whatever.
As soon as I saw this, there was a Pi Moroni tweeted a picture of some with stands bolted to the back, and my immediate thought was it looks like a joggler.
It does a bit, yeah. You could probably retrofit one of these inside the case of a joggler, actually
What's
make
a
it
joggler?
useful.
What's a joggler?
It's a computer.
The generic name is the OpenPeak OpenFrame, but O2 sold them as a sort of a digital fridge door, and then no one bought them, and they were reduced to £50. So
I think you'll find we bought lots of them.
We bought lots of them.
Lots of geeks bought them
because they were basically a touchscreen device which ran Linux.
Right.
So I've got one which I have monkeyed around with, and it's a bit of a Frankenstein's monster these days because it's got a big heatsink sticking out the back.
I remember that, yeah.
But it's quite cool.
Yeah, I really like these devices. They've got hard stands so that the circuit for the display can take a power input, and then you can mount the Raspberry Pi on the stands over the top of that, and then power the Pi from either the USB port or some power pins that it has, so you can power the whole thing, the display and a Pi, all from a micro USB connector.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I think in a couple of months, I think I might have to get one of these because it would make really a sort of a portable Pi a little bit easier to set up.
Yeah, it's a cunning little device.
Yeah.
I look forward to a review from you, Martin. Meanwhile...
Ah, right, okay. Meanwhile, America's broadband watchdog has been suffering some backlash over their plans to control software updates to Wi-Fi routers and potentially smartphones and even laptops. The FCC has got a proposal out to change the rules over radio frequency equipment, which would oblige manufacturers to specify which parties will be authorised to make software changes. And this has been kind of widely reported as you're not going to be able to flash your own open source firmware on your Wi-Fi routers. But the Register's got a really nice write-up, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes, which talks about the reach of this is far broader than just wireless routers, and encompasses, as I said earlier, smartphones and computers as well.
So is the reason for this because they want to control, in theory, they want to control from a security point of view who makes changes?
I think it's more about protecting the radio spectrums.
Oh, okay.
Because you can fudge a different firmware onto your device. Like, for example, I've fudged a firmware onto my devices here so that I can use Wi-Fi channels that normally my router doesn't allow. Yeah. So because it's congested around where I live. So I've moved up to channel 13, which normally in the UK you wouldn't have access to. And I think they want to limit those kind of things. But the Tinfoil Hat Brigade think that actually what this means is they want to be able to embed code from people like the NSA and CIA and FBI, and not allow you to replace it. So they've got a backdoor into your network.
Right.
Yeah, I've not just read that angle, but also that some of the Wi-Fi router manufacturers are pretty poor at providing updates to their equipment anyway.
Most of them are, really. They should all run Snappy and everything will be fine.
Yeah, and those of us in the know deliberately buy models of routers that we know are compatible with the various open source projects, so we can run a firmware that in many regards has got more features but also stays up to date, and when security exploits are discovered they get patched promptly, and so it limits that. But I think the other concern was when it starts to extend into smartphones and laptops, that you potentially lose some of your ability to put your own custom operating systems on these devices as well, not just about the the software and firmware that controls the radios and the basebands.
And finally, Laura.
So Oracle appears to be making redundancies in the ranks of its Java evangelist team.
Is this...
yeah.
Well, this is obviously bad news for them.
Yep. So... Oracle, I believe, haven't confirmed this, or they hadn't last time I looked. It's come from some of the evangelists posting on Facebook and Twitter.
Right.
Yeah. I think the Register's written an article about it. I can't comment a massive amount on it because I work in developer relations for IBM in Java.
Oh. So, IBM hiring in that regard?
Not that I know of. No, so I work in developer relations for Java EE, so I know some of the evangelists through Twitter. But I don't know any more about it than what's been on Twitter.
I mean, it's not entirely surprising. It's sad for the people who are, who've lost their jobs, if that's the case. But, yeah, it's a sign of the times, really.
Yeah, from what Reddit says, some people have lost their jobs, but some people haven't. We've got links to those articles here.
Okay, we'll put them in the show notes. I think that's the end of the news.
And now it's time for a roundup of community news and events. And the first item on the list is that a fork of the open-sourced Ubuntu One file sync code has been uploaded to Launchpad. I can't pronounce the project name. Magicicada?
Or Magicicada, yeah.
Yeah, Magicicada server. But a quick look through the Launchpad, I can see there's a number of forks and they're very current and there's a lot of activity at the moment. Wow. So it looks like someone's picked up that code and is determined to do something with it, which is good.
That's awesome.
Magicicada,
it really is.
There already existed as a project as an alternative client for Ubuntu One, and so now
right.
I think some of the people involved have taken this, now made it so the client can point at a custom server, and are updating the server code so that it runs on more. Because I think the version they released was designed to run on Precise, and so they're updating it to work on Trusty, which is good because I tried installing it on Trusty and it didn't work.
Yeah, they're also. It looks like they may be updating some of the underlying technologies because some of the commit messages I saw with sort of dragging up Django versions to current releases and things like that. So I've got a question. I never really used Ubuntu One much at all. Was it a reliable file sync platform when it was running?
I thought so.
Yeah, in my experience, it worked very well.
It kind of depends. I think it depends who you ask. And I used it quite a lot early on. Like as soon as it started, I started using it, and I got frustrated with it for a number of reasons. One, it at the time I worked for a company where we had a proxy server, and I've lamented on this in the past that open source developers don't work behind proxy servers, so they often don't code for proxy servers. And so Ubuntu One just didn't work behind a proxy, so I was screwed. I couldn't actually synchronize my files at all. And that was frustrating. There were occasions where I lost files. There were occasions where I had collisions between files on different machines and as a result lost data where, Tomboy notes or something were in out of sync on one machine and another one overwrote them and it blatted the new one with an old one, which was very frustrating. But at the same kind of time, I had the same problems with Dropbox. Nowhere near as much, but I had similar kind of problems with Dropbox. So I don't know if that was just the maturity at the time and not enough eyeballs on it or what, but I think now with higher expectations and more people looking at it, potentially it could be made to work more reliably.
Yeah, this is why I was asking the question, because I've tried 3 or 4 times now to get OwnCloud up and running, and actually getting OwnCloud up and running is fairly trivial and it's easy to do. And I've found that the contact and calendar syncing is pretty terrific, and even the document editing online is fairly robust for my requirements. But I've never had any success in putting a great deal of file synchronizations through OwnCloud. So I'm sort of looking at this thinking, could this be, another quality open source file syncing tool that maybe could be used alongside an OwnCloud instance to supplement what I've found to be its rather unreliable file syncing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think this is, Mark talked about this and Jane, when Ubuntu One File Sync was shut down, is the fact is other people were doing it better and in a way that generated revenue for them. And we weren't. So that's, part of the reason why it was shut down is because it wasn't as popular, it wasn't as robust and reliable and bulletproof as some of the other offerings. So I hope maybe over a longer period of time, when there isn't somebody who's wanting it to be profitable, so soon, it might have a chance to mature a bit and maybe more people will start using it. We'll see.
Okay. Well, next up, the subject simply reads the next generation SDK.
Was it something to Star Trek?
Well, I hope so.
No. So you may or may not be aware that the Ubuntu SDK, I added this into the list, by the way. The Ubuntu SDK is based on Qt Creator and uses all kinds of bits and bobs to make it easy for developers to create Ubuntu apps, for phone and tablet, but in the future also for desktop. And there's a lengthy blog post from Zoltan, who works on the SDK team, who runs the SDK team, about how they're making some changes to the way it's all being delivered and how you develop apps. I mean, you develop apps in the same way. You open Qt Creator and you write code and you press a button and run it. But the way it's all packaged up, one of the problems we've got is that many users use LTS releases. So the last LTS was 14.04. So that's 18 months ago, or just over a year ago. And some of the SDK components aren't being backported all the way back that far. And the longer we go forward, the further diverged the LTS is from the SDK. So what they want to do is package it up in a way that it's very easy to download and install, in the same way that some other SDKs, you just download an executable or a package and it just unpacks everything and it gets everything set up for you. I think they want to make it super easy and potentially also so that you can do it on another Linux distro, because at the moment it's very tied to Ubuntu. You have to use the SDK on Ubuntu, but you could potentially use it on Linux Mint or Gentoo or whatever other Linux distro you use.
Cool.
Good. And we've got an item here about bringing Glucosio to Ubuntu Phone, which will hopefully help them meet their goals of reaching as many people as possible with tools to help improve diabetes outcomes. So who can tell me more about Glucosio?
So, Benjamin Carenza, who's a long-time contributor to the Ubuntu community and Mozilla as well, started a project called Glucosio, and it's an Android app, I believe, and they're looking to do iOS as well, but they're also looking at other platforms, including Ubuntu Phone, Tizen, Firefox OS, Yola, all of them. And I think, from what I understand, the app is for people who have diabetes, to be able to monitor their food intake, their insulin levels, and all the kinds of factors that you have to take into account when you have diabetes. With a view to also providing data, anonymized data, for research into helping people with diabetes. So he's put out a call on Google Plus asking for developers who want to get involved, but on any of the platforms. I'm specifically interested in a version for Ubuntu Phone, but they're looking for developers to help them on that app.
Cool.
Excellent. And lastly, we simply have a URL, which I recognise. It simply reads peppercarrot.com So, who added this to the show notes and why?
I'm curious.
It's so the reason why I added it, it's peppercarrot.com. And sorry, for those who can't understand my pronunciation, peppercarrot.com. It's a cartoon, and it features a wizardly witch and her cat. The wizardly witch is called Pepper, and the cat is called Carrot, and it's a little orange carrot, and it's very cute, and it's a nice cartoon. I read them all over a short period and had a few chuckles. It's very nicely done. The artwork is lovely.
It is really good looking.
It's really, really nice, and it's all made with free software. At the bottom, it lists the software that's used. All the free software, whether it's GIMP or Inkscape or Krita, and what distro mostly they're running, and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really nice, and it's funded via Patreon, and it's
Creative
funny.
Commons.
Yes, and it's Creative Commons. It's really, really nice. I would recommend everyone go and have a look, and if you're so inclined, maybe back it on Patreon.
Awesome.
Yep. And that brings us to the end of our community news and feedback.
We love getting your feedback, so please send it to us. Even the pointlessly mean stuff makes us laugh a little bit. If it's short, tweet us on @UbuntuPodcast. If it's less short, but please no essays, email us on show@ubuntupodcast.org. Or you can leave a comment on the relevant show notes on our website, ubuntupodcast.org.
That's all for episode 26. We'll be back next week when we'll be discussing restoring apps and bring you some Command Line love.
I think you'll find actually that was the end of episode 27.
Was it indeed?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
26. I don't want to picky or anything,
Well, what's one number
Facts.
between friends? Yeah.
You're not supposed to point out the bloopers, because then otherwise nobody can email in with the continuity errors.
Ignore that. Ignore all that. Feel free to email in and tell us
Yes.
Mark was wrong.
Send us lots of screenshots too. And stop recording.